Look guys, you know me, huge Star Wars fan, so when I found out this movie is gonna take place in 1983, I was like, holy shit, that's the same year as Return of the Jedi. So I was like, there's no way that they're gonna include Return of the Jedi, but Bryan Singer, he just threw that fun little Easter egg in there. It just warmed my heart. I love you so much, Bryan Singer. Okay, so X-Men Apocalypse. So X-Men Apocalypse continues the story of Charles Xavier and his band of mutants, and 10 years after the incident that occurs at Washington, D.C., he's accomplishing his goal of finding every mutant around the world and creating a school for the gifted youngsters. Everything seems to be falling into place until an ancient being known as En Sabah Nur awakens from his sleep, and then he finds that this world that he's in right now is much different from the one that he used to know. He's disgusted at what he sees, and he grabs every powerful mutant that he can to cleanse the world and possibly rebuild a new one. As Charles Xavier learns of En Sabah Nur, he and his fellow students are brought into a war against the all-powerful god before they enter into the age of the apocalypse. So X-Men Apocalypse is the 8th film in the X-Men franchise, or the 9th one if you include Deadpool since he is in the X-Men universe, and this is the 4th film directed by the legendary Bryan Singer, so that should be enough to where you're like, oh yeah, there's no doubt this movie is gonna be good. He's pretty much 3 for 3 for X-Men films, so getting that same director back for these types of movies, it's almost destined to be like an amazing work of art when it comes to superhero movies. Although I wouldn't call this new X-Men amazing, but it's just good for me. I'm not gonna bash it like how some critics are doing right now over the internet recently. Before I get to that, I have to touch on some positives because mostly everyone does a great job once again in bringing their characters to life. You got the old veteran actors such as James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, Nicholas Hoult, all give solid performances and all still have really great chemistry with one another. But the one that stood out to me was Magneto, because every time he's on screen, the movies give him such an amazing characterization to the point where you still really care about this character. In X-Men Apocalypse, it gives him more of a deeper character, and once the movie reveals as to why he's on Apocalypse's side, you really feel for him. You understand why he's doing what he's doing. And it's really, really heartfelt too. Like, I had man tears, man. Man tears. And we have the newcomers giving their rendition of the X-Men characters that we've seen in previous films, which they're playing their younger selves, of course, and they all do a really solid job. You have Ty Sheridan, Sophie Turner, Alexandra Shipp, Cody Smith-McPhee, and many more that do justice to the characters that they're playing, and I liked most of them each time they were on screen. I would say the weakest out of all of them would probably be Sophie Turner, because when she was just delivering her lines, it felt like she was just reading directly from the script. She wasn't really adding too much personality into her character, and I know that she's great in Game of Thrones, but in X-Men Apocalypse, didn't really impress me too much. And then we have Oscar Isaac playing the iconic X-Men villain Apocalypse. Now, his performance was great, but I just wish the movie would have done more with his character. In his screen time, he made sure that he was stealing the show, and he was menacing throughout, to the point where he may be one of the best comic book villains that we have gotten in a long time. Now, at best, I would call him a good villain. He would be great if the movie showed more of what Apocalypse could do and what he's about, to really earn the menacing name, since he really is an interesting character. But what this movie does so right with him is that he was menacing from beginning to end. He has a goal in which he desires to accomplish, and the particular tone in which this movie captures with Apocalypse, it stays consistent throughout. He wasn't cracking jokes or anything like how Ultron was, who had such great potential of being a great villain like the Joker from The Dark Knight, but it just wasn't. Some of the best things about X-Men Apocalypse is definitely the action, because each time Bryan Singer tackles another one of these films, he makes sure that he delivers some visual appealing action. And he does it again with this new film. It was intense and engaging, it was shot extremely well, and it was just really cool to see these characters use their particular powers. But what I loved most about some of these fight scenes is that some of them had a point or a theme to it. Although a good majority was happening for visual appeal, some fights became emotionally engaging. I just love when action scenes have an emotional connection with the characters and the audience. You get that and the visual appeal, and I can't help but say it was really awesome to watch on screen. And back again to the critics who have been bashing this movie over the internet, because I walked into Apocalypse going on like, okay, this movie can't be as bad as what they're saying it is. However, unbelievably, I can see as to why they hate it, because I'm not gonna lie to you guys, a good half of the movie can be viewed as a large incohesive mess. But what X-Men Apocalypse does is the whole catching up with the characters aspect to the script, so it's like, okay, here's where this character is at, and now this is where she is at, and he is at. Like, you know where I'm going with this. The movie keeps jumping from character to character, and it doesn't really have a main focus on who the main character is for this movie. Like in First Class, it's Professor X and Magneto. Days of Future Past is Wolverine, and Apocalypse doesn't really have that. And if you hate when movies do that, then it might bother you. But why it doesn't bother me too much is that when they introduce or reintroduce these characters, they're in a much interesting place than the last time that we've seen them. Plus, when it's been 10 years and they magically don't age, then yeah, I find that really interesting. But what bugged me personally is that since this movie is titled Apocalypse, I didn't necessarily feel the apocalypse vibe in there. In the final battle sequence, it felt like the apocalypse from where they were fighting, but in other locations, it just didn't have too much damage for it to feel like the apocalypse. And apocalypse being a worldwide catastrophe, but it being in a singular location, you don't really receive that in the movie. A lot of it felt like a huge rush to get to the final battle, but I will say it does make up for it for the amazing visual appealing action. But if stuff like that bothers you, then you'll find this movie to be just okay. For me, however, I still find X-Men Apocalypse to be good. It's nowhere near to be as great as Days of Future Past, but I will say, if you want to see X-Men Apocalypse, it is definitely worth seeing at the matinee price. Bryan Singer, you still have my respect. I'm glad you made this movie. I also didn't include this, but Quicksilver sequence, amazing. It's probably better than Days of Future Past. Also stay for the end credits because there's a little extra scene at the end. But anyway, have you seen X-Men Apocalypse and what did you think about it? And what is your current favorite X-Men film? Whatever it is, leave it down below. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all that social media shit down below. Keep in contact with me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And as always, may the Force be with you.